Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. It's Gameweek 28 and this is my team selection. The biggest news for me this week was the Chelsea double game week going through as planned. As I mentioned in the cheat sheet video, that was going to color most of people's transfers this game week because we had the option of going for players from Newcastle, even going for options from Aston Villa. But it seems like the priority clearly is to go for Chelsea. And as I've laid out my team here, I have a prospective bench with Sanchez and Bowen and Weghorst in there. But clearly there's going to be one more player who makes way. And if you look at my entire team here, it's pretty clear that probably one of the defenders is going to make way this week for a Chelsea player. There is obviously an opportunity to gamble and maybe move away from Bowen. Bowen is a player who you could definitely direct to go for, let's say, a Chelsea midfielder. But since I have relatively great players with good double fixtures in Rafinha and Coutinho, and then Son having a great fixture on the subsequent week alongside Salah, there's no real need for me to make a midfield transfer, and I plan on using Bowen as part of my Game Week 30 draft in a sense to help me prop up my team in that week where I imagine the ceiling will be extremely low and I'll have one or two more players than average when it comes to the blank game week when we consider non-free hitters. As far as Dennis, he's unfortunately still staying in my team. He's actually did turn out quite well for me in game week 26 in that sort of double, and I hope he turns out well for me this week. The main concern, of course, is going to be Arsenal and Wolves are very tough matchups, and we've seen them, I would say, get the better of some of these bottom half table teams and get very consistent results. Wolves always managing to keep the scoreline low, and Arsenal maybe slipping up a little bit lately, especially in Game 26 as an example, but overall generally trying to keep the scoreline low versus these teams lately. I think this Arsenal team has become slightly less creative as well, but we now have an option where Tierney, I think, might have to fall towards my bench, and as you can see here, Laporte is going to be another option to consider to make way for a Chelsea player because Tierney makes a lot of sense to actually stay in my team, given that he plays in Game Week 30 and also has the double next week, even if Liverpool is going to be included within that. So my plan for my transfer this week is definitely going to be Rudiger in. I think it's the safest play. Unfortunately, right now you have the option of James, but I don't think he makes sense at this juncture just because if you've been listening to Tuchel's press conferences, I don't think his fitness is fully there yet, and there could be a possibility that there's already rotation within the Burnley game coming up immediately. Obviously, we'll have to also stay tuned to things like the FPL news and how that impacts the sort of right wing back position that James is now playing in. But that's the main concern with going for James. I feel like Rudiger has safer returns. If for some reason I feel like someone like James is fit and ready to play, or even someone like Ziyech is actually fit and ready to play both games, then I will consider maybe alternate transfers. But for now, my team is actually going to include Rudiger, and the player who's going to make way is going to be Laporte. I plan on actually moving Tierney to my bench just because I have Ramsdale to cover for him. And in terms of the other players in the team, I think when you're looking at the single game week players at the very least to try and explain why they've stayed it ahead of Tierney, I would say Trent and Salah, to be honest, are just non-negotiables. We also saw Trent, for example, score in the West Ham game, even though they conceded versus West Ham. And then Salah, I mean, he's going to be explosive somewhere around the effective ownership of 120%. And I imagine he's going to be a great captaincy option, even though he just has a single game week. Just following some metrics and just having a look at his season overall and his overall form, I think there's no reason to take Salah on my team. The same sort of goes for Son, where I think if you've looked at the underlying numbers for Spurs, they've actually trended very highly lately, with the defense slipping up just a little bit, but Sung Heung-min's threat and also just the general partnership with Kane and also Kulusevski providing a third option is very enticing, and I think this Everton team will really get the smackdown in a sense from Spurs if all things go to plan. So that really is how I plan to lay out my team. I guess Dennis is the most arguable option, as discussed previously, when it comes to doubles. I just think that even though, yes, Watford are not the best of teams, he clearly is still, for me, a talisman of this team. And when you look at the doubles, I just think I can't pass up on a striker who, for the most part, has been a very valuable asset for me this season. With Tierney, as I said, he's kind of hedged by Ramsdale in my team, and maybe that there's a little bit of a missed opportunity here because it could very well be the case that Arsenal get a clean sheet versus Dennis, and Dennis is directly affected. But conversely, you could argue that Dennis could affect Tierney, and therefore I just don't want to put myself in a situation where without a double, I'm kind of staring at a double Arsenal defense, which hurt me really bad in Game Week 26 when I kind of went for this option. So sort of learning from my mistakes there. As far as the rest of the team, the most interesting thing was going to be discussing the captaincy, and that's going to be between Rafinha, Coutinho, Rudiger, and even Salah for me this week. You could even argue Cancelo. I mean, Cancelo had a fantastic sort of game week. This week is one where I think there's a lot of mediocre options for captaincies, and I can completely understand why a lot of people will be pivoting between different options. I imagine that the effective ownership of players won't be absurdly high. Salah might be the highest this week, but I think if you get your captaincy right this week, it's not immediately present who will be the best captaincy option. I think right now I'm actually leaning between Rudiger, Rafinha, and Coutinho. If I really had to trim down the list of assets that I would be interested in, Coutinho is a weird one because I think that Southampton game is going to be a bad game, but they will be playing at home. And then still, Leeds with a new manager, I don't have a lot of faith in Marsh, to be quite honest, in terms of actually shoring up the defensive leads immediately. So that's kind of why I think Coutinho is interesting. As far as Rafinha, obviously a new manager will definitely help with the sort of style of play, and Marsh's encouragement of a sort of 4-2-2-2 system, which is part of the Red Bull lineage, to be quite honest. And I think he could really thrive if he gets to play almost as a second forward. We'll see what happens there. Even if he ultimately plays at the right like he usually does, and I think Aston Villa's defense and also Leicester's defense as of late have been relatively poor. So I think Rafinha can still conquer in those games. But then when you look across the board to Rudiger, I think he might be the safest captaincy option this week. We've just seen Burnley and Norwich really struggle, in my opinion, in the last 2 weeks to score versus some of the top teams. And that's where I think Rudiger will be a very consistent option. I think he will be someone who, similar to Tierney and the reasoning for why I brought him in Gameweek 26, should be someone who could get theoretically at least one clean sheet and probably an attacking return just because he is such an attacking player himself. A massive threat on set pieces, and definitely someone who looks to get involved even in open play when he kind of forages up towards the opponent's half. So that's going to be my decision this week. I think I'm going to put the captaincy on Rudiger. We'll see what happens there. I might even captain Rafinha when it comes down to the live stream, so do stay tuned. And of course we'll be following the news with anything last minute with Coutinho as well, because there could be maybe impacts with Buendia coming back in the lineup and things like that. But that's it for now. I hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead, and I'll see you guys very shortly.